this is Dan Miller for Bluegrass Unlimited magazine, and this week I want to do part 3 of the basics. In part 1 we showed you how to find just different patterns in playing the root and the 5th note over a bunch of different chords. In the second installment I showed you 3 different patterns that you can use to play root and 5th over each chord of a 1-4-5 progression. I showed you 3 different ways to look at that. And in bluegrass, predominantly, majority of the songs are going to be a 1-4-5 progression of some type, okay? That's not always going to be the case. There's some songs like certain fiddle tunes that are going to have a flat 7 chord. There are songs like Salty Dog Blues that are going to have a 2 chord and a 6 chord. There's other songs that are going to have a 3 chord. And so we do have to know where these other chords lay out. We have 3 patterns that we talked about last time that will help us find our 1-4-5. Okay? And because the 1, 4, and the 5, if you can know where those are and then can relate the others, the 2, 3, 6, and flat 7, usually you're typically not going to play a diatonic 7th chord because that's a diminished chord, and usually you're not going to see diminished or augmented chords in bluegrass. So that's why we can get away with playing our 1-5, because major and minor chords, you're not playing the 3, and that's what defines major or minor. The 1 and the 5 are always in major and minor chords. Now when you go to augmented and diminished, things change with that 5th scale degree, but we're not going to worry about that because this is bluegrass and you're rarely going to see an augmented chord or a diminished chord. So if we, just some theory, diatonic chords, the major chords in diatonic chords are what we call chords that are in the key, which means every chord, the 3 notes of the chord, is in the scale of the key. And the major chords that are diatonic to a key are the 1, 4, and the 5. The 2, the 3, and the 6 chords are minor chords as related to being diatonic to the key. And then, like I said, the 7th chord is diminished, but we're not going to really worry about that in bluegrass. Usually if the 7th chord shows up, it's going to be a flat 7. So if we know how to find those other chords, and again, because if we're just playing the root 5th, if we're not walking arpeggios, we don't have to worry about the difference between major and minor, because the difference between major and minor is defined in that 3rd scale degree, and we're not playing that. We're just playing the 1 and the 5. So it's good news for bass players. We don't have to worry about whether the chord is major or minor. And so you just need to find the root. Once you can find the root, then you know from the first video how to find your 5th based on the patterns I showed in the first video of this series, number 1. And so logically, if you think about where the 1, 3, and the 5 are that we learned last time, it's not too hard to go up a whole step to find the 2, and up another whole step to find the 3. And then, you know, if you know where your 5 is, then you can just go up a full step to find your 6. And then, you know, your flat 7 is just a half step above the 6. If you start to think about it in that way, it won't be too hard to discover patterns. Again, we just want to find patterns, because if you're in a weird key and you're just trying to find the root notes based on the name, you're going to have to memorize what every scale of every key is, and that's just not necessary if you know the patterns, if you know what pattern to use. Okay, so that's what we're going to focus on. So the 3 shapes we worked out last time, and I'm going to do all of them relative to the key of A, because the way the bass lays out, you can find each one of those patterns in the key of A. So the first pattern, you'll remember, is this diagonal for the root, and then this neighboring note open for the key of A, a D chord, and then an E chord for your 5. So it's this diagonal for 1, this neighbor for 4, and one, full step up from 4, from D to E is your 5. So you'll recall that pattern. And you can move that pattern to any 2 set of strings or move it up and down the neck to find where to play 1, 4, 5 in any key. So looking at that, typically the 2 chords that you're going to find most commonly outside of the 1, 4, 5 is a 6 chord, which is a 6 minor, but again, we don't have to worry about that. We're just going to call it a 6 chord because we're just playing the 1, 5, or the flat 7, which shows up in a lot of fiddle tunes, okay? Like Red Haired Boy and Salt Creek and fiddle tunes like that. If we got this diagonal, like we're playing the A, the flat 7 is the neighbor 1 string higher pitched than the 4 chord. So this is 1, 4, 5. Flat 7 is take the position of the 4 chord, which in this case is open, and move it over 1 set of strings, and that's your flat 7 chord. To find your 6 chord, you know your 5 is here in A. I'm going to go up a full step. In this case, we're in the key of A. This is the E chord here, which is the 5. Go up 1 full step in the key of A. It's the F sharp minor, which again, we don't have to worry about it being a minor. We don't even have to worry about being F sharp. If we know this is our 5, we just move up 1 full step. We have our 6, okay? So our flat 7 in this 1, 4, 5 pattern is 1 over from the 4. And then the 6 is 1 full step up, 2 half steps up from the 5. So you've got those. Now the 2 chord, we got the 1 chord here, we're just going to move up a full step and use this diagonal pattern to find the 2, okay? And the 6 chord, okay, the 3 chord, we have the 5, we know where the 6 is. That 5 in relation to the 1 being the 6 is a 3, okay? So this is a 2. You could think about going up. You could do this stretch, or you could play here for the 2. Or you can think about wherever my 6 is, that second note I play off the 6 chord, that is a 3 relative to the root of the key you're in, okay? I hope that makes sense. So that is all of the chords in the key. We did the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5, the 6, and the flat 7, okay? And those are the most common chords that you're going to find that stay within the key, and it's really rare that a bluegrass song goes to a chord that's outside the key. It's not unheard of, but mostly if you know how to find those chords, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, you're going to be pretty safe in the context of a bluegrass song. So that works in the 1, 4, 5 pattern here, where to find those other chords in relation. You just got to work with it, practice it. Practice where those chords are in relation to that 1, 4, 5 pattern, and you can easily find those other ones. With practice, it'll be kind of like second nature. And then if you start your 1 on the key of B, then everything else is just relative. So if I want to go to the key of B, here's my 1, my 4, my 5, right? So my 7, flat 7 is going to be over here, and then I can go up, to my 2, and everything else is relative to that. Once you start moving this thing around, B flat and B, you'll probably want to change things around, going to C, go into a different position, or else you'll be getting way far up the neck. But that's what we're going to look at as far as the first 1, 4, 5 pattern. Okay, the second 1, 4, 5 pattern, let's look at this. Again, we're going to stay in the key of A. The second pattern is if I play my A here, and my 4 is there, and my 5 is here. That was the second pattern we work with. Again, you could move this around, right? But let's just work the key of A, okay? So again, if I'm thinking of this as my 1, my flat 7, again, is going to be this G, this open G, but relative to here, I'm just thinking about going a full step down. If we're playing this particular 1-4-5 pattern, I can think of just going one full step down from where my 1 is, and that's going to be my flat 7, because the 7 is a half step from the 1, flat 7 is a full step down from the 1, okay? And same thing, my 5 is here, so I go up a full step to get my 6. Same relative thing to what we talked about last time. And my 1 is here, so I might want to go up here to get my 2, right? Last time I had my 1 here, and I just walked up to 2 here. And we can think about that too, because your 1 is here, and then that note on the other side of where your 5 is here, the second note you play out of your 5 is going to be your 2, okay? As a root of a chord there. So you could go your A here, which is the 1. You could go up to B, just go up a full step here, or you could go where we went last time, over here, and play that diagonal. And that, relative to, you know where your 5 is, right? The second scale degree is the 5 related to the 5, if that makes sense to you. Just think about that. You know, if you're playing a 1-5 over E chord, it's this E, B, right? Well, in the key of A, the 2 chord is a B. So E, B, there's your B. If you know where your 5 chord is, you know that the second note you hit relative to the 1 of the 5 chord is going to be the 2 of the key you're in. That might be a little confusing, but think about it and you'll get it. So, so we got our flat 7, we got our 6, we got our 2. Again, our 3 is, we could keep going up, but we're going to get pretty high there. If this is our 1, again, relative to where our 6 is, we know our 5 is here, our 6 is here. We can find that 3. 6, 3, 5, 2, 4, 1. That's an interesting thing to think about when you're playing your chords. If you're playing your 6 chord, if you're playing your 7 chord, 7, 4. Relative to the key, we're talking about scale degrees of the key. If you play your flat 7, it's the 4 chord. If you go to your 6, it's the 3. If you go to your 5, it's the 2. If you go to your 4, it's the 1. So if you just remember that, relative to when your root note, when you're playing root 5th, that may help you. Again, it might confuse you, but it may help you figure out where all the other notes are. Because you're playing those notes. Every time you play a 6, you're also playing a 3 relative to the scale. Every time you're playing a flat 7, you're also playing a 4 when you're playing that 1-5. Every time you play a 4, you're playing a 1 relative to that 1-5 in the key. So that might help you find those things. I don't know. It may be confusing. It sort of helped me when I thought about it, okay? So again, I think that goes through all of those. So we found our 1, our 2, our 3, which is right opposite our 6, right? And then our 4, of course, and then our 5, and then we got our 6, and then we got the flat 7, okay? So that is going to be relative to the second pattern that we used, okay? Throwing out all these numbers, again, might be confusing, but if you just chart it out and think about it and play through these patterns, they'll become second nature to you. And whatever key the song moves to, you'll be able to find every chord that they might call out in the song fairly easily. Just using a pattern without having to know, you know, what is the 6 chord in the key of E flat or whatever. You don't need to know that. You just need to find the patterns. Okay. Let's go on to the third pattern we worked with last time. Okay, the third pattern we worked with last time was, we'll stay in the key of A. So if I play my A open string, the 5th of that is E. First time I played it here, second time I played it here, that E note. This time I'm going to play my low E. I'll play my A here and go this way to the lower pitch to play my E. And then again, relative to that, the D and the E are going to be in the same place they were the last two times. We've just been moving our one chord around. First time we played it with the diagonal. The second time we played it with this higher octave neighbor. The next time with this lower octave neighbor. Okay. So again, now we got to figure out our other chords. Flat 7. We know it's just this open one, but if we're going, if our 1 is here, you think about the 1 here, you skip over a string and your flat 7 is on the same position as your 1. I'm just playing open, and my flat 7, I skip over a string and play that other string. That's the flat 7. So relative to this 1-4-5 pattern, that's how you find your flat 7. It's also going to be up here. That might be okay to think about in the key of A. When you get to other keys, that might be more difficult to think about. Okay, but I would go with that first one where it's in the same position, but you just skip a string and move over. All right, so that's your flat 7. Your 6. Again, we're just going to go a full step up from our 5. We know our 5's here. Go full step up, and then we find that. Then we're going to think about, the other ones are pretty much going to be the same, okay? 1 is here, 1 is here. We could go 2 this way, where last time we did 1 and then went to this diagonal position for 2. We could go 1 this way and then go 2 there. The root's the same, I'm just going the other direction. We could do that for the second. The third, same kind of thing. We go down to the third, we could go this way, or we can go that way. We can do it, use a diagonal or use a neighbor. Go the third, all right? The 6th, again, is one up from the, one full step up from the 5. And I think that covers it. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, flat 7 in the key of A with the third 1-4-5 pattern. So I think that if you take some time, and you can create your own patterns. Again, like I showed in the first video, there's lots of different ways to play the 1-5. We just showed 3 ways to do it in the key of A, or over the A chord. You got this, you got this, you got that. You've got different ways to think about all of those, okay? You could go, you do your A here, and then play your 4, D there, and go over here low for your E, you know. So you've got all these little different ways to think about it, different ways to approach it. They all give you slightly different tonalities, and you can mix and match these things. But the point I'm trying to make in this video is that if you will discover patterns, not only to find your 1-4-5, but to find where all of the other most likely notes that you would play in a bluegrass song lay out on your fingerboard, then when you get to a jam, you won't get stumped if somebody calls out a tune that has different chord pattern than different than 1-4-5. We all pretty much get really skilled at finding our 1-4-5s, because if we spend any time jamming with people, the 1-4-5s come up all the time, and we get familiar with those. But when a 6 chord or a 2 chord or a 3 chord or flat 7 chord, maybe you're not so familiar with that. And if you know a pattern and figured out a pattern and practice those patterns, then you will be ready, okay? And that might help you later when you start to learn bass runs and when you start to walk arpeggios. You'll know more about where the notes lay in terms of a pattern related to the root of the key, okay? And later we can talk about that, maybe walking arpeggios and walking bass lines. And so for now, just to get out your bass and try to figure out, related to your favorite 1-4-5 pattern, try to figure out where the 2, the 3, the 6, and the flat 7 are, and play along with songs that have that. You know, in bluegrass you can play Salty Dog Blues in whatever key you want to play it in, because it has a 2 and a 6 chord, okay? And then you could play Salt Creek or Red Haired Boy, or one of those songs that have a flat 7 chord. Challenge yourself to find bluegrass songs that have chords outside of your normal 1-4-5 and get more used to them, get familiar with different ways to play them, and I think you'll have an easier time when you go to any jam session. You'll be ready for any song that might be thrown at you. Okay, that's it for today. This is Dan Miller from Bluegrass Unlimited magazine saying good luck on the bass.